Consulting isn't too different from that, as I ended up finding out, where you are providing services, knowledge, or expertise to solve for a client's problem rather than doing that or building a product or a service for a market need. So, first and foremost, just go out and do it, right? Go fail, learn, repeat, right? Growth is not comfortable. I look at,
Hey
all right, rock
Alex,
on.
how are you doing?
I'm well, Andres. How about yourself, man?
I'm doing good too. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for accepting to share your experience with our audience.
My
C-
pleasure.
Can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. For those that don't know me, my name is Alex Turgeon. I graduated Clark University in 2016 with my BA in management, and then hung around for the fifth year accelerated degree at the time. So graduating with my MBA in 2017 with a concentration in information management and business analytics and digital marketing. Since then, I had gone on and had the opportunity to work at Booz Allen Hamilton for a little over 5 years. At that point, I had actually started my own venture, a creative services agency, then known as First Pulse Consulting, which this year was acquired by Valeri Labs, an international software design and development firm, to extend their current service offerings. In which case, we had rebranded from First Pulse to Valeri Digital, and so that brings me to where I am today as the founder and CEO of Valeri Digital, formerly First Pulse, and the Chief Growth Officer at Valeri Labs.
Oh, thank you. Can you tell us about your career journey since graduating from Clark University?
Yeah. As I mentioned, the fifth year had rolled around. At that point, I had made the determination to stick around one more year.
Mhm.
Had spent a lot of my time as a entrepreneurship and innovation minor within the entrepreneurship space. Had actually successfully launched, then failed. My first startup during my time at Clark with fellow Clarky Abhijit Singh. There was WooConnect at the time.
Mhm.
Had started to see patterns and started to pivot as we do in entrepreneurship. The idea, which was originally a technology solution for small businesses, into actually managed and creative services for those small businesses that we noticed at the end of the day, we're looking for a big business impact on a small business budget, that we said. Because that was the first evolution of as what we ended up knowing as First Pulse. I was fortunate enough during my fifth year to get an opportunity to interview with Booz Allen Hamilton, based in Washington, D.C. They are a large consulting firm, primarily working with the US government. And at
Mhm.
that point, between a few conversations, they had inspired me essentially to look to go to a larger firm at that point in time. So I had the opportunity after graduating from my MBA to go down to Washington, D.C. to support Booz Allen Hamilton. Had an opportunity to also support a myriad of different clients, starting with over the IRS in terms of redesigning their call center experience, really touching upon user experience at the time. Didn't really identify that yet, but being pretty fresh in a large consulting firm, my first real big business experience at the end of the day was just learning by doing, kind of dipping my toes in a lot of waters, trying to figure out what I liked, but more importantly, what I really didn't like. And then forming more of like a formal codex around a lot of the things that I had got a lot of exposure to at Clark, but never really had the professional kind of framework to apply it to. And so outside the IRS, had supported a couple projects over at the Department of the Treasury in partnership with DHS, and then ended up through a couple of my experiences in digital project management, identified really what resonated with me, which was user experience, ultimately making the government internet less shitty. Folks should, as law-abiding tax-paying citizens, I believe, should be able to have access to government services both in person and online. And so that really had resonated with me, this mission of a higher purpose here. And so I had the opportunity then to take on a project over at the United States Postal Service, running USPS.com as the user experience business team lead. So working with a lot of our UX designers, really rolling out and developing our usability testing, as well as what ended up being competitive analysis research that helped inform a lot of our research that then helped actually guide our designs that we saw in USPS.com, the postal store. And so throughout that experience, was able to learn a lot, work with some phenomenal people, had opportunities such as working with the White House and doing the COVID.gov. And I think it was 2021 to 2022. So I had learned a lot. And then at that point in time, really started to pick my head up and seeing what was next. And I had at that point then the opportunity to take on a few smaller clients through my freelance practice, First Pulse at the time, where I was then introduced to now my co-founder and partner in crime, Guy Bastone, who was the head of Larry Labs, who, tying it back to some time at Clark, actually worked on his first, had worked with him on his first startup that he had found at Clark, Fitivity. And so coming full circle, 5 years later, we were back at the table having a conversation that we had had 5 years ago, where I think we had both needed certain experiences to learn and grow in our own separate ways before coming back. And long story short, we ended up finding ourselves being exactly where we wish we were 5 years ago. And this time, with the opportunity that had arisen, I had the chance to bring my company, combine it with his at this point through an acquisition. And now I'm with Valeria Labs, starting to build, essentially building the next generation of startup apps, working with, again, a lot of startup organizations, but also a handful of enterprise clients. And that brings me to where I am today.
Cool, cool. This is super interesting. And we'll try to probably go like step by step by
Yeah.
first talking about consulting, and then we'll go back to your current like work and job. How
Absolutely.
do we define consulting? Like,
Yeah, it's interesting coming from entrepreneurship, and having done it for myself in terms of trying to fill the need in a market or provide a product or service for folks that might need one, right? Identifying a need in the market at the end of the day. Consulting isn't too different from that, as I ended up finding out, where you are providing services, knowledge, or expertise to solve for a client's problem rather than doing that or building a product or a service for a market need. So it translated pretty well. At the end of the day, you as a consultant, you're bringing in some form of subject matter expertise or know how to do something that oftentimes the business does not internally. And so that is essentially the role. There's many shades of consulting. It's a big umbrella. You can define a lot of services, a lot of types of consulting practices underneath. But that's how I generally look at consulting is ultimately you're coming into an organization or even if it's just a singular client, they've got a challenge or a problem that you've got to dig deep in, take ownership of, and solve for them.
okay. And how what like is it like when you join your first like company through the internship and like along the way, does this definition change or like how do you think like your vision of a consulting changed through like the time?
Yeah, you're touching upon a great point. As I mentioned, consulting being so broad, there's there's kind of like three or four different flavors of consulting, in my opinion. First and foremost, you have the traditional consultants, like you have strategy consultants that come in, are in there for like 6 months to a year sharp. They're learning and absorbing as much as they can. They're rolling out a strategy and giving it over to the client to oftentimes implement themselves, right? And so they're in and out quick. They want to be on the cutting edge of like either technology or like business processes and strategy. But they're the ones that are essentially like they'll design the bridge. We'll get to that analogy in a sec. Then you have what I consider like the maintainers. You have folks that, for all intents and purposes, like they're performing a function that they as a company do not have. So they outsource, they bring in consultants to help perform this function. Oftentimes it's more daily maintenance and support, general operations, keeping the ship running, right? They're not building the ship, they're not building the bridge, they're maintaining the ship, they're maintaining the bridge, which is equally important to make sure that the operation and the business is still running smoothly. And so those are kind of the two angles that I see as consultants, right? And those projects are obviously much longer, have usually a much longer life cycle. They might come in and also just perform that function as long as like if it's like software development, right? They're going to come in and build a product for you. And as long as their team that business can operate that after, awesome. They'll take over that role. But oftentimes you'll even see like general maintenance and support contracts that happen after, in which case they're retaining them to make sure that they're keeping the lights on at the end of the day.
Mm, okay. Cool. And how difficult do you think like getting into consulting is today for a graduate student or like someone who just
Yeah,
graduated?
I think it's the landscape has changed a bit, right? The idea of your general management consultant are kind of it's diminishing, in a lot of ways. We've seen this over the last 5 to 10 years now. You're just not seeing a lot of people that like don't have technical skills coming into the general management consulting role. Now, granted, that's different in different consulting, again, being very broad. You have very large consulting firms,
Mhm.
prestigious in their own right. You've got Deloitte, McKinsey, Bain, BCG. You have Booz Allen in many regards in the space that they're in. Those are very large firms that have very established processes that you'll be able to go in, learn, and frankly, their runway for like both internships as well as hiring processes are much bigger because they're a larger organization, right? You got to
Mhm.
have a foot in the door, and it, who you know, does help. It does matter. On the flip side, though, there's smaller boutique agencies that are doing like very specific niche things that if you can match that skill set or you can provide that value, you have a great foot in the door. And then ultimately you have freelance, right? You have folks that are, we could start, anyone listening to this could start tomorrow in their own freelance practice, right? So the
Mhm.
idea of how difficult it is at getting consulting depends what you're looking for in consulting. If you're looking to be the Monday through Thursday traveling to a client site somewhere and then coming back, those are larger firms. Those are a little bit tougher. Not to say that you can't find those in boutiques, but like at the end of the day, you could start tomorrow. You know, you can find a problem that a business is having. You could find a problem that a potential client is having. To put yourself out there, if you got the know-how, you got the chops, and you have the subject matter expertise to go and try to solve that problem. You're solving someone else's problem. You're already doing consulting. So that's how, candidly, and I'm sure we can get into it in a minute, is that's how I got into consulting, into what I ended up finding out was consulting, and which was a legitimate industry and practice to get into after Clark.
Cool. And how do you think, like, how did your education at Clark prepare you for your career?
Yeah, I think speaking to the last point that I just made, Clark, especially in my fifth year, if you're in the SOM department, I found was very good at taking what you learned in the classroom, the theory, and
Mhm.
encouraging you to go out and practice it, right? Go find where the rubber doesn't meet the road, right? Like go find where things do not, like when you're looking at theory, do not line up. They break for all intents and purposes. How are you going to adapt? How are you going to be able to then, as I mentioned, apply theory in practice, working with an organization, understanding real world problems, right? When you go out there and find like a client working on a classroom project throughout the semester, you find pretty quickly that it's not a case study, right? There's so many open variables. There's so many things that at the end of the day, you need to do much more digging on. You'll learn about subject matter that you have no idea. And so I always find like some of the best consultants are folks that sit back and are just able to absorb information. They dive deep on topics that they don't know to even become like a pseudo subject matter expert in whatever industry, field, market, client that they're working with. And so to bring it back to your question, my education at Clark, like at the end of the day, like it's a liberal arts education. It instills you prioritizing the why over the what, and really thinking critically about problems, which I think build a lot of great like core like competencies in a consultant. And so, yeah, the classroom was very helpful, but they were also very encouraging in going out and testing and learning through experiences and
Mhm.
general experiential learning at the end of the day to go out and prepare you for what a career might look like in consulting.
Before going back to your current
Yeah.
like role, what were some of the biggest challenges like you faced in your career and how did you overcome them?
Yeah. I mean, when I first started, and I think this probably will align with a lot of current students here, like looking to get into the space. You know, how do I even start? I mean, that's the imposter syndrome is real, right?
Mhm.
And I was fortunate to have really great mentors. One of the best things that I heard during my first couple of days at Booz Allen is we're all just faking it. We're all just pretending, and all we try to do is pretend a little bit better each day. And it's not to say like you don't know what you're doing, but it's like the idea of we all have some form of imposter syndrome, right? Where you're charging for your services, for your expertise at the end of the day, and it's at the beginning it can be very awkward. It can be very foreign, right? To just be like, well, these are my services. How do I charge a rate? Like, how do I charge for my time, for my expertise? Um, So that was a pretty big hurdle. When I started my freelance practice, that was one of my largest hurdles, right? How do I value my time and my expertise, the value that I'm bringing to someone? But on the flip side, a couple of challenges that I had at a big agency and a big firm like Booz was I wanted to get on a project like day one. It like doesn't always happen. There are folks that come in, they'll sit on what we call the bench, the beach, which for folks that are looking to get into large consulting agencies, like expect this. I couldn't sit still. Like I wanted to find an immediate project to get on, right? I want to be billable. I want to start working on a client project. I want to start doing something. So through that, one of my biggest challenges that I had to face and ultimately came out learning was like just learn when to sit back and absorb that information. It's not to say like there's plenty of problems to go solve even internally. So learning more or less to again take a minute to breathe, trust the process, especially in these larger agencies that there's a grand scheme of things. You're going to get on a project. You'll be able to go ahead and be client facing if that's something that you're looking for. But during the time that you have, enjoy it, learn the business. Like that's something that I encourage everyone to do. And that was a challenge that I had faced within the first 6 months of essentially being at Booz Allen and being on the bench waiting for that first right project for me. Um, Go be inquisitive, go ask and learn from mentors, like from some of the senior leadership. Uh, and so that's kind of the lesson learned from those challenges.
Interesting. And it's
Yeah.
true, like the syndrome, I think today, probably I don't know why, but I feel like schools and like university are not really talking about it at any point of your like student journey. And then when you arrive in a company, then you start like living it. And then sometimes like if you probably watch videos like this one or any other like podcast, you can have some of like point where you can work on that, but usually at university you don't have anything. I don't know if you during your experience like at the university you have any sort of like mentorship or even a course like a class talking about that.
Yeah, in terms of and in terms of entering the consulting fair, I was lucky enough at this point. I'd already had the offer at Booz Allen. I was lucky enough to meet a few alumni that were willing and able to help mentor me. Right,
Mm.
I was fortunate enough to not need like the in for the job, um, because another alumni, frankly, had helped me a handful of years prior. Gary Lebovich was very instrumental in a lot of people that have joined Booz Allen from Clark University, and I think we all have a lot to thank for him there. One of the trustees and alumni at Clark here. However, the best piece of advice that I had, and was really fortunate to get some exposure to a few alumni mentors because I had put myself out there, right? I didn't know what I was going to find. I didn't know what I was looking for, honestly. But I was like, I'm going to consulting. Who are folks that I can connect with and resonate with that have already been doing this for years, right? And Dan DeSano was actually one of those alumni. I believe he had spent quite a while at Booz Allen, similarly, and then actually went out and started his own agency, and I believe he's still over at Access Point running their entire company. And the advice that he has gave me in the multiple times that him and I had a chance to like touch base, and I had a chance to just candidly ask him questions was, um, he let me know at a place like Booz Allen, by extension, a lot of other firms is the cream rises to the top. So you're going to come in with a cohort of people, right? And to know that you're all on the same level is humbling and comforting in some ways, in the sense that the people that want to put their head down and grind, do the job like no one else wants to do, and do your homework at the end of the day, you know you're going to exceed your peers. And so that was encouraging for me, someone like myself that like I want to hustle, right? Like I might not be the most, I don't necessarily pick up things the most intuitively, but I know I'm willing and able to try to outwork some, not always someone. It's not always a competition, but like I'm willing and able to even outwork myself to learn and to figure it out. So I encourage everyone to to do that. Not to a point of burnout, right? It needs to be a healthy balance, but um, your destiny's in your own hands in a lot of ways, and you get to drive your own ship at large
Mm.
agencies like this. You're building your own brand, which was also a challenge that I faced. You and everyone else that are coming into an agency like this, or a large firm, right? It's
Mm.
not to say you're like a name or a number, but like you and everyone else have these skill sets. Greece, what are you going to be known for in Amazon, right?
Mm,
I people started to learn me as like a specialist generalist. Like Alex is going to dig into the data. He's going to be able to generate actual like actionable findings and recommendations and connect the dots to the next step. Like it's not he's just not going to answer what he's going to answer so what. And so I
mm,
built a brand around that. That's what I was known for at Booz Allen, and that can be a lot. Also, another challenge for folks that are entering really any industry and any job is like you're now leaving Clark. You're leaving a very inclusive environment into the real world, which is often very exclusive. And you got to advocate for yourself. You have to build a brand and like some resemblance of like, when you think of Idris, what do you think of? When you think of Alex, what do you think of? And hope, right? And ideally, it's what you want it to be, right?
yeah.
This guy's a go getter. He's going to get the job done and get it done right. So
Yes.
long winded answer. Sorry.
That's good. It's good. It's good. And now let's dive deep on what you are doing currently. Can
Yeah.
you probably navigate or just describe a typical day in your current role and what you
Yeah.
enjoy the most about it?
So I went from a very, very stable day in, day out supporting the United States Postal Service on .com, the postal store from their UX perspective. Very predictable hours, 9 to 5. Awesome client, great coworkers there. To a startup where we are aggressively pursuing growth, expanding our offices, increasing our deal sizes at the end of the day, working with greater and greater clients. So as both a founder and CEO of Valeri Digital, which for us at Valeri Labs as a whole is our US based digital experience marketing creative services agency. I'm splitting time between that and the chief growth officer roles and responsibilities at the broader Valeri Labs, which is our international software design and development agency. So building the business, the core competencies within Valeri Digital, particularly the services that we're offering within digital experience. Oftentimes we're doing that through like discovery, working with our clients, being the tip of the spear anytime we're kicking off a project to build and understand the general requirements of, frankly, the idea or concept they're coming out with. So that's oftentimes formal user stories, requirements, UX wireframes,
Mm,
all the way through like to being retained once we've gone into design and development to retain that discovery lead as a product, right? We want business owners to go be the CEO of the business. So that way we'll have our product manager be the CEO of the product, know that it's in good hands, become a trusted advisor and build a trusted relationship with them. So that's the Valeri Digital side of things. The real fun side of things, which is like the answer to your question is every day is different. There's always a different opportunity to pursue, a fire to put out. But when you look at chief growth officer, right? When you hear the word growth, you break that down into two things, as any consultant would. You have revenue and you have costs. And if you're looking at the revenue side of things, that's very much external facing. How do we build the business? How are we doing business development, creating lasting partnerships with other folks that are going to be able to, we're going to be able to collaborate with? How are we going to maintain those client relationships, maintaining the bridge, while also trying to find additional add on work, but also the cost side of things, much more internally. How are all of our offices between India, Uruguay, Croatia, Peru, and even Nigeria, as we're testing out offices there? How are we ensuring that we have standardized processes, efficient team structure in a way that is controlling costs? Because then you have larger revenue, you're trying to maximize revenue, you're trying to minimize costs to ultimately get growth. And so that can be a handful of things. Again, it's engagement management, forming partners and business development, managing and teaming, managing and improving our team processes. Then, of course, like all of the client and day to day that we're working with them and actually building, launching, and scaling their own apps. So, long answer short, pick a day of the week and it could be anything.
yeah.
But growth
Interest.
is growth is my goal. And so that's what I'm focusing on, and that's my North Star. As long as it's contributing to revenue or cost in that sense, that's what my day job looks like.
Mm, okay, interesting. And so, what do you think are the some essential skills and quality for like succeeding in this role?
Yeah, I think for us, and one thing that it really differentiates us from a lot of other agencies, I particularly within software design and development for both onshore, nearshore, and offshore. I think this applies as a soft skill for anyone looking to get into general consulting or just general agency services is empathy and understanding of the client, right? That is it's a very core soft skill, but understanding their why is something that I found to be very useful in terms of the engagements that I have with whether it's a lead or a current client, right? Ensuring that we understand, meet, and exceed their expectations. We understand why they're doing the things that they're doing. Do they want to build a business because they care about the mission and have a passion of a higher purpose? Or do they want to sell this? Do they want to just go raise funds, flip this, and become a millionaire? Right?
Yeah.
Understanding what they're looking to get out of this is critical to conversations that you'll have with them. Building your own relationship with them, and ensuring that at the end of the day, when you're a client success manager, you understand what success is to the client. And so that's something that I've taken a lot of pride in really trying to hone that craft. And I've had a lot of opportunities to do that for small business owners, startup founders, and even government agencies, working with a lot of the clients there from Booz Allen.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Thank you for these insights. What do you think today? What are the trends on the market? What trend do you see emerging in the industry, and how do you think probably they will impact the future of the field, either consulting or entrepreneurship in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I mentioned, I think long gone are the days of just your non-technical general management consulting. They're still out there, but it's very boutique. It's very niche. You're seeing a lot of people actually move into like product management, in my opinion,
Mm.
that are kind of from that discipline, specifically around like business analysis there. So a big trend that I've seen, like the macro trend that we've seen over the years, is like the evolution and pivot to you still need those core skills and competencies within like a general management consulting. You need to be analytical. You need to be able to be adaptive. You need to be able to be client facing, have those soft skills. You also need, oftentimes I'm finding, to have a technical competency, right? And that can range, whether it's like, hey, I got some data science. I can dig deep into the data from a data analytics perspective. I can do data visualization. Hell, you might even be like technical in the sense of like, you might not be the lead software engineer, or yeah, you might not be the lead software engineer. You might not be writing the code, but to understand the implications of like, hey, why would we choose Flutter versus React is really important, right? So having technical understanding and acumen, being able to talk the language and translate it in a way from someone that's technical to non-technical, is a major macro trend that I've seen in the industry. I think the I don't think it's a flash in the frying pan. I don't think it's a flash in the frying pan to say that what we're seeing within the broader AI, ChatGPT, as well as all the other companies that have been spun up. I think that's here to stay. Have a lot more longevity than what we've seen with like, you know, general blockchain, and in many cases the iteration of that, which was like NFTs over the last couple of space. So I see that as something that I do think is going to continue to grow, have an increasing footprint. Right, our company has looked at ways to how can we extend this value, what we've seen in ChatGPT and the capabilities that other
Yeah.
companies have been able to build in this. How can we extend that value to our clients? Can we build faster? Can we create greater features? Right? Can we incorporate ChatGPT to train it on a model that we can then use in one of our clients' apps? One that we have right now that we're working with is a company called Athos. They are a youth sports ecosystem where we're using Athos AI, proprietary, based on ChatGPT and a training model we have built for to leverage on top of ChatGPT to create engaging content, AI generated content that's going to engage youth sports athletes, whether they want to learn how to do a mean in lacrosse, like we'll call it like a mean roll dodge, split dodge, to be able to do like jump shots and being able to do like awesome basketball handles, right? So we can use all of that to create
Mm.
a feature that otherwise we'd be reliant on like user generated content. So there's a million applications of this, and we're finding a lot of clients reaching out to us to help build the next iteration of what they're looking to do and leveraging AI. So I'd get in there. You don't need to be the master of it. You don't need to be like even a top 10 percentile like subject matter expert in this, but I think you can get about 80% of the benefits both for yourself as well as a broader level trend that you can provide or pass that additional value to a client just by learning like the base 20% of
Mm.
what it takes to actually learn and effectively use tools that are leveraging AI at this point.
Yeah, AI today is like just shaking all the industries.
It's
And
bonkers. It's bonkers.
yeah. So, what are the advice you have for like students looking for job or getting into consulting today?
First and foremost, just go out and do it, right? Go fail, learn, repeat, right? Growth is not comfortable. I look at it from a perspective of like it's similar to like a shellfish or like a lobster, like molting, right? It's
Mm.
stressful, it's pressure, but you come out of it bigger, better, stronger in a lot of ways. Um, so I say go out, learn, and do, right? You're at a place, and this is particular to our Clarkies listening, like you're in a very inclusive environment, not just Clark, but the city of Worcester has opportunities abound. So many small businesses and organizations that would love to have, right? Just a bright mind, proactive. It's someone that's going to take initiative on a problem or a task that, like, as a small business owner, they're like, I'm just trying to keep the lights on at the end of the day. I've got a million other problems. If someone could take this off my plate and solve this for me, it'd mean the world, right? You're getting experience, right? And then if it's outside the classroom at that point, you've proven you're worth what you can do. Don't feel bad about charging it, right?
Yes.
Like start to get an understanding and knowing your worth, right? And I say that because at the end of the day, I think the only reason why I ever got the job at Booz Allen was I was fortunate enough to have two or three of those projects under my belt on my resume that when an interviewer or like a recruiter asked me about my experiences, like I lit up.
Mm.
I told that story like it happened yesterday. At that point, it was still happening. But like to you get so much more excitement and it's so much more real and authentic to talk about something that like you had such ownership on that it beats any like in the classroom project to go work with a client to tackle and solve something that like was real for them. And then you see the real implications of that. So that's what I encourage everyone to do. If they're interested in getting in the field, it's great experience, it's great exposure. It's something that you can speak to. And at the end of the day, like that's a reference that like even if you weren't able to go like a big consulting field, you can build a practice around. That's what I did at First Pulse. And I was very fortunate to do that. And I still had these lasting relationships with everyone that I've worked with. I've got Brendan Melican over what was formerly Woobury. I believe they closed down a couple of years ago during the pandemic, but he's still instrumental in a lot of the things that I'm doing with the greater city of Worcester. And I think that speaks to maybe the other component of one thing that I would recommend most people to do is um, as Clarkies, you're already a part of the Clark Alumni Network. I was very fortunate enough to find people that were willing, open, and receptive to have these conversations to kind of share their lived experiences and ultimately help shape and guide my perspective of what I wanted to do. Um, it's not just myself. There's plenty of young alumni and older alumni that want to give back to Clarkies, right? They want to give back to Clark. You're part of a larger network. And even beyond that, right? Go there and it's not networking. I hate the idea of networking. It's you're forming relationships. And I think most Clarkies, I've almost never had a conversation with someone where I felt like it was networky. It was transactional. All they want is like a referral offer to Booz Allen or a job coming out of college, right? They're very authentic conversations. And I think Clark does an excellent job creating that environment. And it sticks with most people when they graduate. So go out there and go say hi at the end of the day. You never know when a conversation's you never know where a conversation's going to go and you'll never know who you're going to meet. So I encourage everyone to reach out at the end of the day.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for all this insight. How do you stay current with the development and change in the industry? What are the mechanisms you use to?
And just a lot of information through podcasts. So like finding three or four that you that are staying current, stay relevant, and provide and relay the information in a way that is digestible to you, I think is really, really is critical, right? Some folks love to go down the rabbit hole of Reddit. News outlets are kind of tougher and tougher to believe every day, but for me, I'm a big fan of the Tim Ferriss podcast. He always brings in relevant guests, folks that are like leading within top performers in their field and industry. So it's great because it goes back to the idea of like being able to be adapt and absorb different perspectives, hearing about different fields and industries that you never thought you never would organically or would naturally be inclined to like Google search, right, and do a deep dive on. And then a couple of newsletters that genuinely can trust. Like Morning Brew's awesome. I think Superhuman's another great one. It's AI focused, and so those are ones that I follow. And even then, Trends, which is a phenomenal entrepreneurial podcast, entrepreneurial newsletter that I follow as well. So that's how I'm usually staying up to date with things. It's again, I try to. There's a lot. It's hard to find signals within the noise, and I think in a day and age like this, especially even in podcasts, honestly, like it's kind of hard to find really good value. And then LinkedIn is like the Wild West now. It feels like the early days of Facebook. But like 2/3 of those posts are just being like generated by ChatGPT. And it's just like we're all regressing to the mean in some way, shape, or form on LinkedIn. So it's a great platform. Again, it reminds me of the early days like Facebook or Twitter. But go in there with caution and just like again with a critical eye. Know that you can't believe everything that you're reading and everything that you're
Yeah.
seeing. Especially like it might not be even the primary source. I see so many things being ripped off from Reddit and then shared on LinkedIn now. It's honestly hilarious.
So yeah, today, like you said, I think many posts on all the social media are just like ChatGPT generated, and yeah, we actually I don't know where we are going now with this, but finally, are we really only selling, or are we connecting with people? So that's the question we need to
Yeah.
ask ourselves. So, but yeah. Yeah, I would say thank you so much for your time. And yeah, we had a great conversation. Do you have any probably last word or advice you want to share with our audience?
I think we covered a lot of it here. One thing I will leave you with here. Um, is something that I've thought about quite a lot, and again speaks to our Clarkies that are folks either graduating or wondering where do they go next, whether they have a summer internship or not.
Mm.
I think fairly certain it's a quote from probably misquoted this a couple times now, but I'm fairly certain it's from essentially the autobiography of Teddy Roosevelt, and the line is, "Do what you can where you are with what you have." And as long as you remember that, I think it's critical and important to know, like it's addressing that imposter syndrome, as I joked about. But knowing that you are ultimately enough and you're doing the best that you can with what you have and the hand that you're dealt. Um, I think it's just comforting. I think it's comforting to know. And at the end of the day, there's a process.
Mhm.
What you do today, tomorrow, obviously will improve what you're doing down the long road. But as long as you take it day by day, you never know where you're going to end up going, and things almost always end up working out. So I know it can be a stressful time for a lot of folks, especially graduating and what seems like it's like the kind of last cohort of the COVID years, right?
Yeah.
Um, but just know that, and then know that you got a much larger support network than you think. If you find a Clarkie on LinkedIn, reach out, and 9 times out of 10, you're going to hear back from them. So.